Pleistocene megafauna had to have diverged and then gone extinct.
Little reggae. Don't expect me to grow dreadlocks. No. Scientist Mel is attempting to make us all into hipsters.
I washed my dreadlocks earlier this evening, so it's all right. I had enough for all of you.
I got my haircut recently, so.
Ta-da!
Take it away, RJ.
Yes, welcome to another episode of Evolution Hour, where we discuss stuff and things and stuff and then some more things.
Not in that order.
And Jackson is here, and thank you, Scientist Mel, for assisting. And of course, as we all know, Jackson was here last week using a Scientist Mel simulation program. And Dee Elaine and the Tornado Pelt ready to explode in volcanic anger at any moment. We'll see on that. Sean W. is in the audience. Lisa for Truth, hi. Sean and I have been gibbering back and forth about a story that he's writing, and since I'm an alleged author, sold a Paralogs of Fog yesterday. That's been delightful on that. So anyway, but our main task here is not such light frivolities. It's the not frivolous thing of going into the book Replacing Darwin, Nathaniel Jeanson, young Earth creationist, geneticist, sorta, who is arguing that all these critters that we're familiar with are actually degenerate models that have popped along pretty much since the flood. That will be the topics of his later chapters, which theoretically he'll be dealing with the technical literature. It's hard to tell initially what he's citing because he neglects to give a bibliography, does not have an index, and that kind of slows down the whole process of information flow. So I'm assembling a reference bibliography. We are now above one source per page, Jackson. I'm getting giddy with the prospects. Looks like, oh, Jackson may have frozen there. I think his internet connection just went turtle. Anyway, but never Tortuga. So we'll hope to see him on again in motion if he can do so. Anyway, at the moment in the chapter 3 that I've been going through for the last few weeks, it's a pile of basic science material that he's presenting, which is when genetics were being developed, when the DNA was extrapolated, when they started to do genome studies in the 1990s and all that, which is all uncontroversial, although he's starting again to tiptoe near fields that are relevant. I put some links up in the video description to some of the open access papers that were available, stuff on the genome of yeast from the 1990s, and he had a paper that he alluded to from Blattner on the E. coli genome, and in a footnote, he even alluded to an earlier bacterium, Haemophilus influenzae, that had been done a little earlier, and it was a gratuitous piece of information to bring up. But the fact that he was bringing it up was a curious problem for him, because Haemophilus influenza is a pathogenic organism. and it has strains that are really dangerous. It turns out it was misnamed because they thought it had a connection to influenza, which turned out to be a virus, the causation of it. But it can also cause troubles and make life more miserable for people who do get the influenza virus. But it turned out this paper that he was citing was going into great detail. Unfortunately, I couldn't put that in the link because it wasn't available open access, but I did look up the technical material from my little secret entrance doors the complete genome would be expected to have complete complements of certain classes of genes known for essential for life, such as potential homologs on ribosomal protein sequences, and that turned out to be true. So they were already applying their evolutionary model to anticipate what the genes would have and what wouldn't be there. They were also particularly concerned about what made it pathogenic, which it turned out this particular strain is a non-pathogenic variety, and it lacks some of the components of the ones that are. So from Jeanson's model of created perfection, shouldn't is the one that doesn't have the pathogenic features, the degenerate version, the decayed, loss of information version, and the ones that have the fibril gene clusters involved in adhesion of bacteria to host cells, the original created model? So was the original created model intended to be a pathogenic organism? But we're not getting any of that from
RJ. It was just degrading shells until the magic fruit made it a human attracted.
Exactly.
So
and so what bothers me about every one of these instances is, okay, if you got your cute little model, use it, apply it rigorously. Don't kind of keep it hidden away. But I think he only wants to deal with lions and tigers and bears and deer and all that kind of stuff. Oh my. But not all those pesky little organisms that only occupy most of life.
Oh, by the way, RJ, you were saying it was pathogenic. It's pathogenic.
Pathogenic? Oh, well, they've got, oh yeah, pathogenic. Okay. Yes, I have, my tang has got tangled up today. And there's
that was a bit of a sore point for me. So
well, it's a matter that I often stumble over words. This is why I bow to the feet of Jackson, who can rattle off these systematic names with a reliability and proficiency. I got to write everything down and kind of pronounce it aloud first, because I'm not nearly as quick on the draw on that. But I make up for it by being annoyingly detail oriented.
Being like an encyclopedia, RJ.
Well, yeah, so I won't be able to pronounce it correctly, but I'll be able to remember where I got it.
Fair enough.
Anyway, yeah, so that's we're still waiting for Jeanson to kind of unspool his argument. There was apparently some misuse of a paper that should be coming up in another couple of weeks that has gotten some pushback from critics of Jeanson specifically on it, and it's way down in footnote 40. On another page or so that I'll be able to get to. But you know, the interesting thing about source analysis is it does allow you to kind of open up the guy's head and look and see what he wants to document and what not. Why is he bringing up a certain subject matter or not? See, he brings up the nematodes, which he brings up in this paper from the C. elegans sequencing consortium from 1998. Because it indicated that there were an awful lot of genes in there that weren't protein coding. And immediately he's thinking, ooh, there's our matter of design. Does that really follow? Well, what was ironic about it is this was actually part of a series of papers in Science magazine. And the C. elegans sequencing consortium paper that he elected to cite was a perfectly fine summary, which I had available online, so I could put that up. Right at the end of that very paper is the next paper in the series, Zinc Fingers in Center elegans, Finding Families and Probing Pathways, which was looking at the earliest stages of where they're figuring out all of these transcriptional regulation things, precisely because, and you can correct me if I've got this incorrect on that, Jackson, is that nematodes are so interesting because they're very basal organisms in that big tree of life thing, to where they are giving us clues in multicellular and wormy things and the like, that they're giving us enormous clues about where the genetic systems are coming from and when they're kicking in. Would that be or bring up, dump on me?
I mean, that's possible. The research that that's entirely possible. The research that I've seen on that tends to focus on nematodes is the fact that they exhibit a feature called uteli. So for anyone who doesn't know, this means they have an exact number of cells. Oh, this means they have an exact number of cells in their body. Males have males and hermaphrodites, and the males have like 100 and something cells, and the hermaphrodites have exactly 100 and something cells. And so what researchers do is they can trace the exact the division and the movement of every single cell and follow every single cell through their cellular generations to their ending place. And so they can see how the whole organism is built up.
So it doesn't get lost in the complex noise of bigger things. Right. Are almost all memory serves me, nematodes are all kind of stereotypic for size, and that's because of that cell limitation thing?
Yeah, I think they tend to be pretty small. They're members of
places where you don't want to know.
A lot of them, whether they're, in the deep sea or in your intestines or your brain or whatever, they tend to be pretty small.
Although they were getting a little giddy about how many species there were for a while there, some were thinking there might be 500,000 or more. I don't think it's quite that many now.
Yeah, maybe like 100,000 species.
Yeah, only 100,000 species.
Which, I mean, it's they're still out speciated by the arthropods, which they're also in the same group as arthropods. They're members of Ecdysozoa, so they molt their cuticle just like arthropods do.
Yet more of that example of working Jackson. Through. Oh, yes.
Everything in Metazoa is outspecied by arthropods.
That's true. I think it's like every group that has species is outspeciated by arthropods.
Yeah. And in terms of overall volume, it's a disconcerting thing to remember that the 20,000 species of ants, their total mass is roughly comparable to the single species Homo sapiens global mass.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying.
And I know from just the ants that live underneath my front lawn that, I have no doubt they probably mass up about as much as I do.
I know from the ants that invade my house constantly.
Yeah, we're safe on that. I'm happy to let them go outside. They're little tiny ones where I live up here. We don't get some of the ants that you get in warmer climates. So I'm assuming,
we get the invasive Argentine ants, so you can't really get rid of them very easily.
Yeah. And there's still a huge amount that aren't known about it. Maybe our little nematodes, or nematodes, depending upon where one would say it. I suppose the English would be saying it differently than we do. But they were an interesting subject then to bring up, because I'll be looking to see whether he ever does anything with them in the rest of the book.
Doubtful. I doubt there are any baromenological analyses of nematode diversity.
Yeah. Anybody that knows to the contrary can let us know. But it's my understanding of the creationists don't really like thinking about parasitical organisms. They don't really like thinking too much about insects or any of the little protozoa. They pop up only peripherally as gee whiz, look at this complicated critter X that does something complicated, and therefore it must be God who designed it, and don't bother too much about what it does when it's doing what it is. And meanwhile, I'm going to go back to dogs and cats.
Yeah. There was like one paper over at AIG that mentions like choanoflagellates, because I think it was Purdom was critiquing some article that was using them as a reference point for how multicellularity probably originated in animals.
Oh, yeah.
Because
in fact, I'll type that into the references. I think I'm spelling it
CHOA. What's it? CHOANOFLAGE.
I know it's got an OA in there. They're ones that really started to hit the big time in the last 15 years or so, as they started getting more and more genetic information from them, because it turned out there's an awful lot of biological systems that are related to where complex organisms came from, that you're showing up in an organism that you'd look at it and you go, well, that's not much. but genetically, a lot's going on in there,
Oh,
which gets back to that whole idea that you have reminded us of that supposedly boring billion of, that life went through, that they, as far as we can tell from the fossils, we can't tell much of anything because they don't leave much in the way of fossils.
Right.
But biologically, probably most of the windup, my suspicion is, most of the windup for what happens later on as we get into the Ediacaran and then Cambrian period, the genetics for that was being laid, the substrate for during that period. So it wasn't boring at all.
Pretty much the entirety, like our common ancestor with plants is pretty much at the very start of the boring billion, and then the origin of animals are pretty much way down at the end of the boring billion. And so that entire middle period is our common ancestor with amoebas, with apusozoans, ichthyosporians, fungi, conoflagellates, all, like lots and lots of little protist thingies, and of course fungi. But that's all those splits, all those speciation events were happening in the boring billion when it.
Yeah, and the one thing we can't tell without a time machine is how many lineages were functioning like a trilobite, a lineage that came on the scene and did its thing for hundreds of millions of years, great success, wonderful, marvelous, ran into a brick wall and went extinct, that we don't know anything at all because there's no existing organism that's descended from it, but it played an enormous part that we'd have no record of because it didn't leave fossils.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of sad to think about how many other potential endosymbiotic events had 100 million year runs, and yet we'll never know about them.
Yeah, they could have hit just the wrong set of circumstances. Some of them might have run into a change in ozone chemistry during the superglaciation or something, to where the poor little things checked out. You know, who is going to say, well, those trilobites, they were only around for like 200 or 300 million years. I mean, what the hell? But all we know are fossils. Even though some creationists still insist that there are some living trilobites around because they confuse them for isopods.
Oh, Lord. Although actually currently I'm working on the index fossil section in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4 of Rocks 2. And it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of fist fights going on between taxonomists over when exactly certain lineages appear. One of the recent examples I was looking up was the Nautilus. The Nautilus may only correspond to recent species, or it may correspond to species that go back 200 million years.
Yeah, all depending on how they want to classify the lineages from them, because you're effectively only going on the shells. Yeah,
and well, also, to be fair, all the Linnaean taxonomic ranks are entirely arbitrary, and so it's like, do we even?
Meanwhile, does it matter? Over in creationism land, they just don't think about it.
It's one of those things where taxonomy is fine for what's currently alive, like naming species and genus, even if species are a silly concept. But boy, just retire it from the use for fossils, please. Let cladistics have that.
Well, yeah, it's like after you go through several papers and they're all kind of arguing, do we classify the same fossil as this genus or a different genus, but it's still in the same lineage and it's still in the same position relative to the others? Does it really matter at that point?
Yeah. And this is another thing where it's like the thing that's staring you in the face that we want to call attention to is the reason why they get into such troubles is because things are so much almosts and nearlies.
And that's the problem.
Right. The very thing that's supposedly not occurring, where you can clearly delineate one kind from another. Let's just bring in our 6-year-olds to decide based on the cognitum what kinds are which.
Yeah, that's actually, and that is part of the problem when you start going back to the origin of say Nautilus, is you see lots of Nautilus-like nautiloids, and so the question becomes, is this part of Nautilus or is this part of the pre-Nautilus? Where does it fall? And they're the living fossils, so they're not supposed to have evolved. So, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and the only way that the creationist is ever going to bump into it is if they try to do the thing that we have already observed they get panicky about, which is actually working out how many Barrowmans there are and how do they distinguish one from the other and what standards do they use and are they going to apply them rigorously all the way across the taxa?
No, I mean,
No.
we have we have loads of microbiologists working on the taxonomy of bacteria and things like that. Creationists are stuck dealing with dogs and cats, so
indeed.
Haven't gone very far.
Again,
Oh, it's
additional
cats and bears so much.
shameless plug for The Rocks Were There Volume 1, our tiny little book that can be used as a doorstop or bang over the people that say silly things about creationism. What we tried to do, and we'll be doing as well in Volume 2, is in the course of all of this wrestling to the ground, creation is stupid, and then pointing, look at the things they don't discuss, is we're able to bring up neat shit. That there's so much fascinating science and you get to see how the actual scientific mind operates. And then you go over to the cricket land of creationism where these subjects aren't coming up.
Oh yeah. With the videos that for instance, or when we write the scripts for my videos, we cover, there are so many subjects that, we talk about on my channel that there is no creationist literature on. There is none whatsoever.
I spotted that.
Speaking of your channel, you should plug your most recent video.
Oh yes, the whale, the transitional fossil whale. Oh, that was a juicy one.
We have as per usual, Rational Mind or EvoGrad and Nestleg to thank for that. They made I believe it was largely EvoGrad for this one, made the animations, and so that was a nuclear takedown of long story short. If his next video doesn't begin with "I'm sorry, I misrepresented this paper," he's just dishonest. I'm sorry. There's no other way of putting that.
Turned into quite a big thing because even though I had read through the script and find it dandy, and I was looking through some of the side papers, and I didn't think that was terribly super relevant to my main point, so I didn't bother about looking up all the sources on the thing. But when I saw the video, the visuals, you damn person, you're so clever with the visuals. When I saw how he was using them in his chart, now I got the whole kick of what was going on. So I went then back.
It's up here versus down here.
It was total. I had to make up my own just to keep track of all of the stuff. So I put the thing together, my own, where the blues are the dates he was giving and the pinks were the actual information. There's almost no overlap between what the actual papers were talking about and what long story short,
he's
claiming they were.
There will be no doubt in my mind that he's just an intellectually lazy buffoon. If in the next, if he doesn't issue some sort of retraction or something and say, yeah, I completely and totally misrepresented this whole list of papers. If he doesn't do that in the next video, or he just never responds to this at all, then I don't really see any point in continuing to engage with him. I mean, we already showed in the homology video series that he really didn't grasp any of the arguments that we made. He didn't understand, for instance, what was it? The argument that we talk about why nested hierarchies are evidence for evolution, because this is the only pattern that would exist under evolution. Yes, God could do it this way, but God could also do anything else. There's only one pattern that could be produced under evolution. So why would God do it literally the one way that evolution could produce? And he kept responding to it with, this is a theological objection. No, this is a matter of predictive power. You have no predictive power. If your intelligent designer can create all life on the planet, created the whole universe, first of all, he can do whatever he wants. He can make whales with little hands and
why are
feathers.
Why are the oddball specialized eyeballs in trilobites only in the facopid lineage, nowhere else? All the other ones diss the creator or something, and you decide you can have examples of things that can occur convergently, and if they do, you discover that there's a genetic architecture that permits that. And in an awful lot of cases, you discover that different routes can lead to similar convergent results, even though the details are very different. In the obvious case, an ichthyosaur and a dolphin look a lot alike, but their internal anatomy and how they swim is all lineage specific because they aren't designed.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that actually brings up a point, which is why did the intelligent designer make ichthyosaurs, dolphins, and certain groups of large sharks all have the same body plan for the same role?
Yeah,
wouldn't he just need one?
One of my favorite bits about the inverted retina issue of vertebrates versus cephalopods, that they argue that the thing works, the cephalopod eye is beautifully designed for its underthing, and so the human eye, they go all this kind of argument. The problem is that you've got aquatic vertebrates don't use the cephalopod eye. If you were designing an eyeball for critters that live in the water, why wouldn't you use the good one for both, rather than come up with one that seems to be so specifically lineage specific that eventually leads along? Oh, I can see even farther down the road, because an argument could be made that one of the reasons why we developed a very sophisticated cognitive system is that we have to compensate for the blind spot. So we have to evolve compensation mechanisms that construct the thing to process those visual systems in a more intricate way that may have actually led to why our brains went off in the direction that they did, at which point the designer will say, see how providential it was of God to make the inverted retina so that human beings would make hamburgers.
Makes sense. I'll worship the hamburger god.
Yeah.
One thing that I find kind of amazing is, one thing that I find kind of amazing is how we as terrestrial vertebrates, we don't live in water, we are obligately terrestrial, and yet we have to have eyes that are constantly inundated with liquid. Yeah. Good job on that one.
Or why make any lung-breathing swimming animal?
Why not? Yeah, why do dolphins have to go back up for air?
Yeah, you can actually drown that way. You know, what did the whales do? And remember, in some of the creationist models lately, whales existed after the flood, as this little four-legged critter crawls off the ark and then scampers off to the water and proliferates at a blinding speed to produce baleen whales and all the rest.
Which is kind of funny because it makes LSS's whole video moot, because even the creationists say, yes, the blue whale is descended from Pakicetus. So
I don't know how much creationist literature. Remember, it's often very difficult to pin down his source field. That he's not exactly.
He's like exclusively older intelligent design works. Darwin's Doubt, Zombie Science for the most recent one, Icons of Evolution. It's all older intelligent design stuff.
Yeah, and none of whom. Jonathan Wells, Michael Behe, and all the rest are.
Why is it even called Darwin's Doubts anyway?
Because Darwin, or he makes a big deal out of. Darwin said that the lowest fossil, or the fossils in the Silurian, just sort of appear. Maybe because he was missing over 3 billion years of fossils. So.
And although from his time frame, it would have been a lesser time frame. They didn't think in all those billions of years. Although the geologists actually could easily imagine that amount of length. The biologists kind of scampered along behind. And then, of course, by the late 19th century, you got Lord Kelvin saying, no, I've calculated that the Earth can only be 60 million years old. And that, of course, was because he was figuring just in terms of how it would take the Earth to cool. And only in the tail end of his life did he start finding out about that radioactivity thing, which alters some of the dynamics of it.
Yeah, with Darwin's Doubt, Darwin just kind of mentioned, because the term Cambrian was actually the existence of the Cambrian strata was actually being debated at about the time that Darwin wrote Origin, and so it really hadn't been solidified. The terms,
Silurian, all the geological periods came along in a dynamic back and forth. So when you go in the same way that we have to remember very carefully about what tertiary meant. in really old literature versus to what it would be referring to now,
Right.
as they began to divvy up and subdivide and subdivide.
Right.
And even to this day, I think Erica is pissed off to this day about how weird it is that you've got the Carboniferous that split up.
Oh yeah, into Pennsylvania and Mississippi, and
yeah, that's only used among American geologists. The Europeans don't give it a rat's ass.
Yeah, it's super bizarre. But I mean, it's really weird that that Meyer is saying, haha, Darwin didn't know. Okay, this is basically the time period when they were inventing geochronology.
Yeah.
And you're like, Darwin didn't know about things that wouldn't be discovered until long after he died?
A lot of them, all of them are ultimately named for very specific places.
So mostly English places.
The Jurassic was named for the Jura Mountains. So there was a parochiality about a lot of these things that eventually then they got figuring where somebody would go along, I think this rock here, which I've been calling so-and-so, actually dates to the same time as this over here that they are now calling Silurian. And so they were gradually creating this.
Which is funny because and that's true. When Darwin went to when Darwin was doing his circumnavigation of the world, he found he went to the Falkland Islands, which is off the coast of South America in the Atlantic, and he found a series of fossils which are from the same system as the Caradoc Formation back in England. And so there was that, and so there was the those, or him pointing out like, oh hey, the fauna's the same here and there, which is kind of interesting. Wonder why that could be.
Yeah, and it was all of that period from roughly 1860 down to 1960 is the period when they were trying to make sense of all those geological puzzle pieces without one giant thing there, which is that the land masses aren't fixed, that they're moving because of plates. And once you hit that new piece of information, suddenly things that were puzzling, and the ghost of Wegener is saying, told you so, told you so.
Sort of. I mean, he's saying, yeah, I didn't really have a mechanism, but I had the general idea right. Although it is funny, Darwin makes a very brief note in Origin saying, isn't it weird that the fauna of India is very similar to the fauna of Africa? And I was like,
yeah,
I read that.
So close.
I mean, that's crazy. He did, after all, come up with the model by which coral reefs form and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, he was... we were talking about a video Sanford did where he was dissing Darwin, and it's just pathetic. Or Sanford is just pathetic because he's got, his achievement of like being a part of the team that invented the gene gun was from what, the 60s? Yeah. So he had like one achievement 50 years ago,
I will not give up the turf of saying that anybody that actually works in a technical field that Darwin stepped into is impressed totally by how much of a diligent scientist he was. And all you have to do is to look at those file drawers of reference notes that he accumulated and the meticulous manuscripts and then the equivalent of the internet by mail that he was constantly communicating with scientists to find out the information. He couldn't call them up on the phone. He had to write them and then cajole them to get the reply on that. He was compulsively methodical. And everybody that ever does any field in there is blown away by how meticulous he is. So all of these armchair intelligent design advocates and creationists that just snoot at him, he's not a really good scientist at all. Piffle.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. He advanced work on the geology of South America, the formation of coral reefs. Before he published his journal, before he even wrote Origin, and then after Origin he wrote Descent and works on orchids.
In fact, that's part of the reason why Darwin was accepted as quickly as he was. That the panic that he was thinking that was going to ensue.
Correction, if I may. The gene gun was 80s. 1980s.
Oh, 80s. Sorry, my bad. Sorry. What? 30 years ago. 30 years ago, but still, I mean, we're talking about one good thing he did 30 years ago versus nothing. So
but anyway, old Darwin was afraid that there was going to be a terrible reaction to his work because of the reaction of the vestiges of creation back in the 1840s. But in that intervening 10 or 15 years, there was a lot of tumult in British society that was taking place politically and culturally, so that by the time this came out, everybody that was in the know scientifically knew the reputation Darwin had as a super careful scientist. And so they were taking this way serious. They go, oh, Chuck has got a book out. We got to pay attention to this. This is going to be good. And remember that volume, and anybody who has ever read Origin of Species, remember this was the quickie abstract that he whipped up in a hurry after the speech with Wallace.
Yeah, he realized, oh crap, I got to get on the ball on this one, or someone else is gonna get this.
As writers, both Jackson and I, we know how hard it is to work up text, and the idea of him just gushing this thing out in a short period of time, not on a word processor either. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know how that man did it, because Origin's a big book. I mean,
500 pages in normal size book form.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized book. It covers a lot.
And he left all of the notes out. He basically just did this is the primary upper surface level text. All of that documentation material, he basically yanked all of that out for the giant natural selection book he was working on. Well, let me pause here to thank patrons, which is one of the reasons why RJ can be so happy-go-lucky, is the fact that I've got some patrons out there who accept the idea that this is important shit to do, that it makes a difference, that we're connecting up in ways that are helpful to people, and plus we write some books and things that are actually pretty damn good. And so let me thank our various patrons who have made it so much easier to be able to have food and ink simultaneously. Our colleagues Hendril and Eric and Ben Simpson and Speed of Sound and Suris and Zeshi, and our researchers Travis Adams and Ian Chan, who is ubiquitous, Convert Me, Eat Meal, James Fitzwater, History Minor, Ralph McFadden, Apologia, assistant researchers Doranku and Torres Real, our friends Daniel and Steve Bauman, Marigail Beddoes, Insects Are Cool, Devin Reeves, Morton Nielsen, Paul the Skeptics, Puffalubicus, Bo Rasmussen, Alex Stone, and Paul Williams. And I will continue to thank every one of the legacy patrons, Jen and Jody and Mike and John and Keith and Andrew and Dyer, Yui, Mona, Brad, Daniel, Nanya, Staggle, Sunsky Stone, Ugbit Showman, Truths, Everett, and Sewer. All of you could help at one time or another, and that was part of the show as well. I know full well that given how unsettled the times are, people, college people, working people, people who have been laid off, people who have struggling figuring out what the hell they're going to do on bill meeting and all the rest, given all of that angst that everyone is on there, the fact that there's been so many that have stuck it out for the old RJ, I am very much appreciative of that, and I will not let you down, if only because I just want to, any woo out there, I don't want to let stand. And we're building a network of the interesting crowd of Jackson and Colton and Ben Cardinale.
Interesting is very, very correct.
Erica, there's Dapper Dino. There's a whole bunch of people that are way younger than moi, who are in the fields that they're just getting their degrees or already have them at a teaching level, but they're new faces on the block. And what we all have in common is dun 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 source methods, that we're approaching this from a source direction that it has never been done, I don't think, as relentlessly as what we've been doing. That we deal with philosophy, we deal with philosophical issues, fine and dandy, and we definitely want to deal with the data floor. We do that a lot. But also that whole source methods thing of how you track down sources and how you make use of them, and it makes you a better thinker, and you discover all sorts of neat shit, and also establish how it is that people like Jeanson and Andrew Snelling and David Menton and all the other wackaloons and the people at the Discovery Institute, how they can be bright people and still screw up so mightily, which brings up part 2 of the show, now that we're after the thanking everybody.
Before we get to part 2, there's a question for Jackson. When do you finish your PhD?
Sorry. eventually. I get my bachelor's theoretically this fall or after this fall semester. So then it's on to master's, and it'll take like 2 years. Then PhD takes like at least 2 years. So
Yeah.
at least another 4 years.
As you focus on what area you want to go into, what's the thing that really revs you up, and you're kind of a polymath there. You have a lot of interests.
Well, I mean, it's all of my interests focus around really just zoology. And so if I can get into that, and that, I think that should be good then.
Whereas I just have a BA in history. I'm just a lowly, pathetic old drudge.
I want to be, here I am. I'm the next Richard Dawkins. Here I am, folks. No,
Yeah, zoology. Yeah. Yeah,
Just
that's
kidding.
in that field.
I mean,
I'll tell you this, you write easily as good as he does.
I don't know about that. His ability to write in prose is unparalleled in my opinion. Heck, have you read his actual technical literature? Like
It's kind of,
he writes the same way. He writes like his books. He can't write any other way. He cites like literature and stuff in his technical papers. I read
well, and Gould would too, in his
Yeah.
work. That they both came. It's in part because they're from a different generation, and in part because he matriculated up through that pompous British
right.
frame that is constantly alluding to things, and they're steeped in it. It's like the pickles that you take out of the pickle jar. You know, the
Right.
sauce is all of that cultural matrix, and they won't let it go no matter what. And it's fun that way. Anyway, to something that's not as fun. The Evolution News and Views a little ways back put up a posting, and I put the links up to all the stuff that you could follow up on it. Prominent biology journal demands government censorship of intelligent design. Dun,
Good.
dun, dun.
Good.
This is
Yeah, I wonder if they're exaggerating.
oh boy, were they exaggerating.
Oh man,
Because-
I was hoping we would just put the boot on their throat.
David Spiegel, Bad Faith Reasoning, Predictable Chaos, and the Truth, had written a paper in Bio Essays, and again, all the links and stuff, you can follow up on it, where
Is
he
Bio
was talking
Essays
about...
an ID journal?
No. This is, no, you're thinking of Biocomplexity.
Okay.
No, this is a standard science journal, and it's
Okay.
effectively kind of op-ed sort of stuff. It's not rather technical.
It's like
people
letters
offer
to
their
nature,
opinions and
or like
comments.
letters to the editor of Nature,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Okay.
Anyway, he goes on because he's very pissed off at the fact that there's so much pseudoscience around. And
Wow.
so he makes some references to the effects that the trend has contributed to, leaving out the highly worrying examples of climate science, which is well known with a few examples. Scientific racism is making a comeback in public
I hate that
discourse.
phrase.
And we're also facing urgent problems with regard to confidence in vaccines. And he's mentioning the coronavirus and the vaccine related to autism claims that were false. And so he's listing off a bunch of stuff. But along the way, he happened to mention intelligent design. And that pissed off Evolution News.
Oh my
So anyway,
God.
at the end of it, Spiegel is saying, but I don't want to end on such a dismal note. We have identified the problem. How about the solution? My favorite Thomas Paine quote, he that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. Eloquently explains why I'm not a great fan of taking down websites. Only the most egregious ones, for instance, those inciting racial violence or denying well-documented genocide, should be treated thus. But what about the sites discussed in this article? In such cases, search engines could have mandatory color-coded banners warning of consistent factual errors or unscientific content masquerading as science.
That sounds like a good idea.
A very good idea, but that
Heresies out of
means
business.
intelligent design websites would get a marker. Big
And
yikes. That's what pissed them off. But
they're not being censored.
They deserve it.
But to be fair, no one's censoring them. No one's saying you can't view this website or even that you shouldn't go to this website.
In fact, I would be opposed to shutting them down. I want people to see how stupid they are.
They're literally only saying, we're going to make this text orange instead of blue. Oh, wow. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some other additional links that you can find in the Evolution News one about side issues, about Popperian falsification, and junk DNA, a lot of the same tropes on there, and you'll be able to get through all of that from the links and that. But I highly recommend reading the Spiegel paper as well as the Evolution News to see again how these are important issues. It's no coincidence that even on that vaccine and COVID issue, there's a bunch of people, including Douglas Axe, who have been downplaying COVID-19 in their publications recently.
What are they saying? Oh, it's just a flu. Oh, there's no need to worry about it.
Partly, yes, and that social distancing doesn't help. That it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't.
The facts show that if you stay away from people, you're actually more likely to get the virus.
Yeah, I guess so.
Wait, really?
No.
And so there is, in fact, I've been accumulating since the vaccine and COVID issue, and that will be a topic that Jackson and I will be addressing in a future book.
Did he actually say that if you stay away from people, you're more likely to get it?
No. He just said that social distancing isn't all that important. It doesn't have an effect on it.
I was just being hyperbolic.
And he, what's interesting about some of the arguments that Axe has been making is, for example, when he was talking about the rate of infections. Some of this stuff is like months old, which we now know was radically sad because we were, at 130,000 deaths and all that, and that was way less than what was the case when he was downplaying it. Anyway, he would have one chart he used where it was a logarithmic scale. So he was trying to show that it wasn't really speeding up because you're going like to 1,000 and 10,000. So by using a logarithmic scale, it doesn't seem to be going up that fast now, does it?
That's critically stupid.
Yeah.
It's going up stupid. It's going up by orders of magnitude. No, the line's like barely going. Look at that.
See, it's just really stable.
Jesus Christ.
That's
the amount of water coming onto the Titanic decks eventually reached zero.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely correct. It started out, a lot of water was coming in, but eventually there's not a single drop of fresh water coming in on that boat deck that's now 70 feet underwater and dropping fast.
I can't argue with these facts, RJ.
Yes, indeed.
If there's anything fortunate about this pandemic, is that it will probably sink the anti-vax Titanic.
Oh, heck no.
Because they won't be able to deny vaccines are ineffective when a vaccine...
We have this trope that goes on this, although there is the one aspect of it that's tragic is that there's an empirical measure because viruses don't give a rat's ass of what the politician decrees. They're going to do their little thing no matter what. We've just gotten into a state there where it looked in Washington State where we've gone to mandatory masks because we were having a big uptick again.
We did too.
We're only at about 60 some odd % of people actually wearing them yet. You have to hit like 90% in order to really have the best efficaciousness for slowing down the material. And they've also found indications that the little droplets can survive longer than 6 feet. So we may want to even socially distance a little bit more. But this is a matter where scientific illiteracy is lethal. Now it's a slow lethal. It's like a 1 or 2% lethal. But if your granny or your close relative or your kid,
RJ,
has dropped dead from COVID in that little 1%, it's like your entire world. And the cavalier attitude that Trump and the various Trumpistas around the place and Governor DeSantis there in Florida, this is hopefully going to have a heck of a lot of political ramifications on people to where they're going, excuse me, but your policies are killing us.
But RJ, it's freedom, America.
Freedom. Yeah.
I love that. I love it. It's just so idiotic that the idea that wearing a mask means you're giving up your freedom.
No, in fact, your security.
Yeah.
It's like if I swear, when they say that, I have asked people, what freedom did I give up? And I just get blank stares because you're not giving up any freedoms. Wow.
Other than the freedom to see their snarling face, as clearly.
The freedom to infect other people, I guess.
There was a video that popped up, I think a day or two ago, which I thought was so revealing. A little old granny at some home repair store was photographing this annoyed maskless big hulking
Oh, I've
guy
seen
in a
that video.
red T-shirt that said "ruling the world since ruling everything since 1776" or something like that. And he was whining that he was feeling intimidated by this little old granny who was calling him out for not wearing the damn mask.
Yeah,
The
that
United States wasn't a major world power until just after World War One, because it just so happened turned out that all the other major world powers got their asses kicked during World War One. So
we
hard.
were the least exhausted.
Yeah.
And we didn't have so many of our factories burned and exterminating half of our population from. Everyone needs to remember, though, that the Spanish influenza killed more people than the war did.
Yeah.
Right. It also lasted, what, 2 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, and came in waves. In fact, my mom almost died of it, and that was in the second wave in 1919, not 1918.
Dang.
Yeah, and they had to go through exactly the same thing. Now it had a different dynamic because that influenza virus targeted young people more than old, and it was really disconcerting because it had a different etiology than the COVID virus that tends to target older people. Not exclusively. You can drop dead at age 16 from it if you have pre-existing, or that idiot Christian QAnon nutball family whose daughter hydrochloroquine and various other stuff, which had absolutely no effect, and even delayed putting her on a respirator at the hospital, and she died. And they don't express the slightest concern over that. Yipes. Anyway, the situation back in World War I was horrific.
The situation for us is here in Florida is we're the new world epicenter for COVID-19. Lovely.
It turns out that trench warfare and the horrible conditions involved with it are the perfect place.
Here's some further problems.
Who would have thought?
Because we're going to be, if that's still cycling when the normal autumn flu hits and hurricane season. So what do you do when you have to go to a mass shelter during a hurricane when you can't do that because you need to social distance? So all of the dynamics are in a mess, and we'll find out whether FEMA will be up to the task or not. Even to the process of how do you socially distance, put sandbags up to improve the levees? All of this, you're not overstressing every system. Anyway, we're learning the hard way a bunch of lessons about what's going to happen in the future, because these pandemics are going to come again and again and again. Who knows what little disease is sitting around there, some little virus or bacterium in who knows where that's just waiting to hop on a plane and travel and upset our apple cart. So we've got to be able to do these things. We learned a lot of the lessons that we then didn't follow because a certain administration and a guy named Bolton decided to axe the preparedness systems that were being put in place by the Obama administration. You know, the stupid things take a while to build up. And the things that we found that were disasters that led to the Great Depression and World War II and that stuff didn't materialize overnight. It had decades of dumb leading up to it, and ultimately relates to people who don't follow through thinking clearly. They rely upon secondary sources and don't fact check them. So ultimately it's all a methods thing. And I, for one, want my uplifting, forward, progressive 21st century back. I do not want to let that go.
The thing that, or one of the things that kills me is that people are still pushing the, it was manufactured in a laboratory in China.
Oh, God, yeah.
I actually, what's his name? Is it Eric Weinstein? He's like an evolutionary biologist, I think. But even I saw him pushing that, or he retweeted an article about it.
Oh yeah, I think Jerry Coyne was grumping at him about it. Wasn't he the one that was fired from Evergreen College?
I don't remember, but he may have been. But it's just, I thought, wow, what is wrong with you? Because actually, what's funny is just past week, another paper came out tracking the origin of how this virus has jumped multiple zoonotic hosts from bats to pangolins, and so
it's like there is a science world, and the science data is not under lock and key. It's not locked away in fortresses guarded by rampaging leopards and penguins with laser beams.
But it should be
open, accessible material. In fact, one thing you can see right off the bat, if you look at the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet and all that, their COVID-19 papers are all open access. They want everybody to see it. They want all the doctors to be able to see it. And, you know, they have to figure out what exactly is the epidemiology. What do you need to do in order to deal with it? How much testing do you need to do and where? The fact, the arguably one of the stupidest things any person has ever said in the history of the universe is when Donald Trump was saying, well, if they stop testing so much, that's the only reason why the cases are going up, because they're testing them.
If we close our eyes, the problem will go away. That is quite literally what he said.
Someone put a nasty cartoon up of a little baby of a youngster Trump asking about the F on his grades. And it says, if you stop testing me, will I be smart?
Yeah, that's yeah.
That's not how any of that works.
And I mean, I just thought it was so funny that people were that later he's like, oh, it was a joke.
Yeah, Sean says he wants penguins with laser beams.
Sure.
Yes, that's a trope that I like playing with the flat earthers. You know, that
beams.
supposedly that everyone is prevented from going down to see the Great Ice Wall because of the laser bearing penguins.
Or as Queen said, dynamite with a laser beam.
Yeah, but so this is a thing where methods matters. It's not some abstraction. People are making stupid decisions in positions of power that not only are affecting what we do now, but can gum things up for a long time to come. And you have to wise up about this and make sure these things. I'd love to know how many scientific illiterates have been put on permanent seats in our judicial system. They don't tend to ask science questions. So if people and reporters really demand that anybody that runs for public office needs to be scientifically illiterate, and that, yes, there will be a set of populations. If anyone has seen some of these city council meetings where outraged Trumpistas are screaming bloody murder about their need to not put a mask on, and the calm and coolness of the elected leaders who have to listen to these people.
Yeah.
Yes, Tornado?
Yeah. Although to go back to what TD had asked, I think that they've been very quiet recently. I really haven't seen much of anything from the anti-vaxxers. Not to say they haven't been doing anything, but they've been very quiet recently. And I'm sure that there will still be some after this. But I mean, you know, back in 2000,
Kanye West, by the way, who is running for president, and according to his own announcement, and he is believing in a Wakanda-style governance system, and so
Wakanda forever
on fiction, and he's apparently a very conservative religious believer.
God,
I have doubts about that too.
That any COVID vaccine is a thing of Satan.
Excuse me?
Yep.
RJ,
just interviewed in Forbes on it.
There are lots of things in there, but I think most
Let's
importantly,
unpack some things.
But yeah, we could unpack lots of things with that. But most importantly, he can't even run in a number of states as a candidate. So if at the very least he should wait, because I thought previously he said he wasn't going to run until 2024, and he waited.
Yeah, well, he's sounding like he's going to run. Although again, it would be
he can't run in several states because they've already closed.
Since when is that going to stop a narcissistic nincompoop?
I mean, he would have. Yeah, I don't know how that would even work.
Jackson, I wouldn't be surprised if Kanye was one of the dinosaur deniers. So
I don't know. Does he actually? Do we really know if he holds any of these beliefs to be true? I mean,
or whether he's just, or whether it's like you know, those revolving doors they have at a lot of hotels and things, that it just kind of spins around and around, and there's kind of a little flow of things, but there's actually no bear there.
Motherfucker.
Yeah.
We don't know. There's I actually would hold a person like that in more contempt than somebody who honestly believes the stupid thing. If somebody is just spitting out claptrap because it suits them for the moment, that's really reprehensible. In a completely different.
I mean, RJ, I think about what you say. I think about what you
Bastards!
said with Trump, where you said he's not
Guys,
a an isolationist because he's philosophically an isolationist. He's an
an isolationist
isolationist
because he's
he
lazy.
doesn't want to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Guys,
I
I
seriously
actually
believe
found
that. Everything
found
about
it,
him is
guys.
one that he would prefer to go golfing, and he would like to lay out a set of commands like, I will command the schools to open, and I will punish you if not. Excuse me, Mr. President, but you don't actually have that power. Never mind, do it.
RJ, I found the actual thing, and he actually does say it. He says he's extremely cautious about a coronavirus vaccine, calling it the mark of the beast, and declaring they want to put chips inside of us. They want to do all kinds of things to make it where we can't cross the gates of heaven. Dude.
Yeah, as we all know, the gates of heaven are Wi-Fi free zones.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no metal objects allowed.
I
That's stupid. He's gonna kill people.
Evidence run by the TSA.
yeah.
Well,
To be fair, there have been
not gonna
people.
go far.
There have been people before who had their head just as firmly rammed up their ass, and every person that we see, like a Kanye West, has their counterpart in previous times. And the only difference is that we get to see it really in the open. And that can be used to our advantage, because so many of the idiots of times past had influence on people. They just did it under the radar. So some of the oddball nutcases that connected up with the Nazi regime and others, you don't know about that. The ones that led to Lysenkoism in the Soviet Union, you don't know about it until the historians start pulling back the layers on it. We get to see everything on YouTube. We get to see it on social media. We get to see it on Twitter. It's what we do about it that matters. So if you see stupid, say so, and pick if you want something to occupy your time rather than a video game. Pick some excessively stupid people who are public figures
or alcohol,
and follow them and comment on them.
Yeah.
Everybody gets.
My own or politicians in my own state were featured on the Friendly Atheists blog today.
Well, there it goes.
Fun.
I was sad because I don't remember the name of the guy. It was one of the representatives said that it's our mayor Perkins mandating that you have to wear masks starting today. He said, again, another guy saying he's attacking our freedoms.
Yeah.
Well,
this is where you're going to really separate the idiots from the non-idiots, the people who can take responsibility for things and do the thing that needs to be done versus the ones who are feckless nincompoops. And we'll all see it. We'll all be documenting it. We'll know it from whether our neighbors are doing these things or not. Most people are behaving reasonably. The question is, will enough do so? And I don't want to wish anybody ill. Even the most diehard Trumpista, I do not want them to drop dead of COVID. I want them out of power. That I do want, but nothing else. But the problem is some of these people are not only endangering their own lives, they're also endangering others. So this notion about how you open up the school systems as though kids are kept in hermetically sealed bubbles. And when they leave the school, they don't interact with any older person. They never touch granny. None of that goes on. What planet do these people live on?
Yeah, I really don't know how they're going to
they're literally
work all of that out.
Kids in hamster balls, basically.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to work all that out.
This is the first time we've had to fully address a pandemic that can spread as quickly as this, because even the earlier ones, oh God, I'm trying to think of that one that was a much deadlier than COVID, but it was hard to spread, so it could be contained.
Oh, you're talking about MERS, right?
Yeah,
and SARS.
Well, COVID is a SARS.
Yeah, but it's one that is a more dangerous one in the sense that it's really easily spread and it's surreptitiously spread because it's asymptomatic in a lot of cases. And so like I asked one of the, I can't remember who it was that was making some arguments about this death rate thing, about how the death rate's been going down per million people. Well, which would you rather be? A 3% death rate when there's only 10,000 people involved, or a 1% death rate when there's 100,000 people or 1 million people involved? Which group would you prefer to be in? Because even if at a lower rate, you have more people infected, you end up with more deaths. And it's the tombstone count. It's revealing that these very same people who will be talking about how the rate's going down, they're data selecting. They're not focusing on
It's the
total
Texas
deaths.
sharpshooter fallacy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to look at all the data field. Whenever you find people selectively referring to stuff that's being put up by the CDC, take a look at the whole website and look at the various charts to get a context for all of that stuff, to realize that, yeah, it's like the issue about job growth, that if your jobs plummet and then you could actually have really large job growth compared to the low you're at, you're not actually gaining back most of the jobs you've got. So you're actually having bigger proportional job increases. It's like if you suddenly chopped off half of your arm and then you had a growth rate of 50% of what's left, you still don't have a total arm left.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with people saying, look at all the jobs. It's like, this is a refilling of the bucket. This is not an overfilling of the bucket.
Yeah, we're going from 14% unemployment to 13% unemployment. Yay!
And it looks like that might actually be we might be going to 15% unemployment with the recent.
Oh yeah, and it's here's an area where it applies in economic terms. Let old RJ the sage tell you what should have been done. That what should have been done,
Sage RJ.
What should have been done is they would have had a whole plan in place so that when a pandemic hits, nobody loses their job. Everybody stays employed. Most of them can't go to work because of the necessity of it. Essential workers like Jeanson and medical people and others would get hazard pay because of that. And then you fill in the gap by funneling money to the various employers to make sure that everybody still gets their paychecks. That way you're not stressing out the unemployment system. Everybody who's ever gone on unemployment knows how much of a jump it is, because there's a delay time before you start even getting your first unemployment check, but your bills are still piling up. And so all of that cascading effect of finances, you avoid if nobody is unemployed. Well, this is exactly what Republicans go into brain dead moment on, because they're going, well, you're paying people to not do things. Well, yeah, otherwise the entire economy collapses. And plus
where else are they going to go?
And it's not as though the money is being put outside and set fire to. It's paying bills. It's keeping the system going. It's keeping people fed.
No, RJ, they shouldn't be alive anymore if they don't have a job. There you go. We said it.
It's one of those interesting things that the far right seems to not understand, is if you give money to people just to like through Social Security or like universal basic income, it's not just disappearing. It's going to go back into the economy.
Well, yeah. Did you see that recent PragerU video where he really suggested we should just jail homeless people?
He said what?
There's the attitude on
yes.
it. Well,
yes.
The two comedians, I've forgotten.
That will get rid of the homeless problem.
I've forgotten which one was which and what their names were on there, because I only think of them as the little thing on Twitter. But they did a hilarious, nastily true remark where they said the GOP 2010, the Obama death panels want to kill your granny. GOP 2020, granny doesn't really impact the economy too much. Just let her go.
Apparently
that's the change in the circumstance. And it is just flaming hypocrisy. Because
I feel like there'd be some constitutional qualms with making homelessness a crime.
Yeah. I mean, just aside from being like an absolute freaking ghoul to do something that like
apparently they never watched The Grapes of Wrath.
A lot of the homeless people are veterans that just can't get work.
You had that occurring not once but twice in American history. You may or may not be familiar with the bonus army of the 1930s, where there were a whole bunch of veterans who wanted their bonuses paid early because the Depression was hitting and they needed the money. And Herbert Hoover sent out General MacArthur to clear away the Hoovervilles that were parked outside of the White House in the parks. But way earlier, there were Civil War veterans who, as the depressions hit in the later 19th century, wanted their pensions paid a little bit more expeditiously. And they had things where they were marching on things. And oh gosh, another Republican president complained about that too. Are we getting kind of a pattern here?
Yeah, I just, the fact that he thinks, I mean, because I made the comment after Dawkins posted that, like, we could do eugenics on people and it would work, but we probably shouldn't comment, because, like, if we just massacre the homeless population, we'll get rid of homelessness. And it's like a few months later, PragerU, if we get rid of the homeless population.
Yeah, and they actually are advocating the thing that Dawkins wasn't.
Yeah, it's like, it's kind of hilarious that this just absolutely evil behavior, because that was a joke that I made. That was a complete joke. But they're like, wait, I think he's onto something. Maybe we can't kill them. All right, fine, we can't kill them.
Here's the thing, and even Darwin reflected on this. He was not in favor of war. And you know why? This is before World War I. He never saw how bad wars could get. He was just familiar with the wars that he was familiar with in the history up until the 1840s and 50s when he was writing this. But he said, it kills people indiscriminately. You can't tell who's really valuable in there. You can't anticipate who's going to make accomplishments. If you're just killing off people, that's kind of stupid. Same way he was not really in favor of inherited wealth, because that also skewed things, although he was a beneficiary of inherited wealth.
It's like, well, he says from his mansion, maybe not everyone needs inherited wealth.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, he was just a little inherited wealth.
Just a small loan of $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, a small bit for that. Well, and by comparison to the big plutocrats and all the rest that would have been around in his period, Cornelius Vanderbilt was.
Yeah.
He was functionally what if you adjust for inflation, he was a billionaire by modern day standards.
RJ, isn't it time to wrap the show up?
Oh, yes, but otherwise we'll go on forever. There we go. Well, Scientist Mel, who was the avatar last week, as we all know, wink, wink. Jackson was here last week pretending to look like Scientist Mel on the screen. I think you did a fabulous accent, and everything you had matched perfectly, Jackson.
Oh, my goodness. It's biology, but Southern.
Anyway, keep up with things. Keep reading and researching. Stay safe, everybody. Find out what the policies are on COVID and stuff in your own state. And if people are doing stupid shit, don't. And
RJ, the policies on COVID in my state, what policies?
Exactly. Yes. Just take a set of technical papers from the Lancet, run it through an electric fan, take the pieces that blow out the end, and then just wave them around, and that'll give you several of the state's policies at the moment. Anyway, on that uplifting note, we'll say bye. See you next week, gang. And everybody really stay safe. I'm serious on that. Bye, everybody. And thank you again, Scientist Mel, a.k.a. Jackson.
Happy to do it.
Other Jackson.
Yeah. Oh, and let us know when we are officially off the air so we can dither down. Or gather dither.